What's up, everybody? Stealing a trick from the Dave Gardner videos channel and getting myself moving tonight out here in a beautiful day in central / New Jersey Shore. As I get myself moving on a journey to get back in shape and take really good care of myself, but that's a video for a different channel. Those of you who watched my yard chat over beers last night know that I'm starting a new YouTube endeavor alongside this one, not to replace it, called Rebuilt Joe. Rebuilt Joe, if you want to follow. If you're a middle-aged guy like me, or maybe you just have a morbid curiosity about watching a fat guy commit to getting in good enough shape to do a Murph in 1 year, then follow that over there. But this is still JC Sports Replays. My name is still Joe, and these guys are putting new roofs on some of the houses around here. But as I get some steps in tonight and get my ass moving, I figured I'd talk to you about my 2026 replay a little bit. Still haven't decided what I'm doing with it, so I'm just rolling every game at the moment. Just rolled 2 games this morning over coffee before work. That was nice. I really like doing that. I love the morning games. They sort of reset me for the day. Start my day off at a nice slow pace. Let my brain wake up a little. And just generally put me in a pretty good state of mind to start the day. So, been doing it for a while. And whenever I get away from it, I find my mornings tend to be a little bit more rushed and anxiety filled. So I try to roll at least 1 game every morning. Usually I get 2 and sometimes 3, and depending on what time I got to be at work, which does vary an hour or so, and how early I manage to wake up. And sometimes just how lazy I'm feeling. Like sometimes I'm just chilling at the breakfast table with the wife for an hour and we're chatting about stuff, so that's all good. But yeah, so I rolled I think games 54 and 55, which are the first 2 games of week 2 of the 2026 Strat-O-Matic replay. First, I'll talk a little bit about how I play, because in another video I posted last week, somebody asked me how I play games so quickly, and I don't think I do. I think I have a pretty average pace. From pulling the cards out, well, the cards are always out. Like the table's generally always set up in the living room, and the wife is kind enough not to be bothered by me sitting there rolling games. I'm pretty quiet. The dice are small and it's a soft topped card table, so it's not exactly a racket or anything. But from the time I have 2 teams sitting in front of me to the time I wrap the game up, do the pitching lines, record the standings, and shuffle off to the next game, it's usually about a half hour. Sometimes the game goes very quickly. If it's a pitching duel, might be as little as 20 minutes, but that includes writing out the lineups, making the lineups, because I vary the lineups every day based on Strat Solitaire Player Rest Chart. So the lineups are kind of changing a little bit every day based on who needs a day off or whatever. I like to do that. It keeps it organic for me and forces me to kind of adjust on the fly, which is what real major league teams do. And to me, it just feels like a more realistic or more engaging replay than if I kept the same lineup every day. I'm not using injuries, which in the past I have used injuries, but for this one I decided not to use injuries. So When they need a day off, they need a day off. So, like, let's say I set my starting 9, right? And I usually do that to begin the season by picking, like, guys come home from work. Picking the guys at each position who had the most playing time. And going position by position. So, whoever had the most at-bats or plate appearances at every position, I try to make that the starting 9 for each team. And then after game 1, I let the solitaire player rest chart determine which 3 players may need to rest. And it does a pretty good job of getting guys in and out. Generally, if a guy has 600 or more plate appearances in a season, he's never going to rest. And then it goes down from there. And if he had less than 375 plate appearances, then every time his number or his position comes up, he's always got to rest. So the way the chart's kind of intended to be used is that you have the same starting 9 prior to each game, and you decide based on the die roll which 3 players have to rest that day. But then after the game, you reset to the original starting 9, the most often played players, and the next game you go again to see which 3 people may have to rest based on additional dice rolls. But what I've decided to do is whoever was in the last game becomes the starting 9 now for the next game. So, if I had the starting shortstop, say, sit out after the first game. So game 2, starting shortstop, had 450 plate appearances for the season, and the dice rolls dictate he has to rest in game 2. Whoever I replace him with is automatically in there for game 3 unless shortstop comes up again. So, probably be easier to demonstrate this if I had cards in front of me. But if you've used the solitaire player rest chart, you know what the hell I'm talking about. And if you don't, but you play Strat, then go grab it, and you'll understand kind of where I'm coming from. So basically, that guy who subbed in is going to stay there until shortstop comes up again, and he probably has like less than 300 at bats. So as soon as he comes up again, or less than 300 plate appearances, right? Because it's determined by at bats plus walks for purposes of the chart. So next time shortstop comes up again for that team, that guy's almost 100% of the time going to be going back to the bench, and the starter's going to come back in. But in practice, what ends up happening is the subs, instead of coming in for 1 game, will come in from anywhere from like 2 to 5 games most of the time. Probably 3 games to be an average. So it kind of simulates injuries in that way. Now, without the injuries, I don't think the usage will come out quite right long term if you do a full season replay. But my plan is to kind of let it roll this way for the first half of the season, and then make adjustments based on actual usage as needed, right? So, you're not going to be able to hear me for a minute or 2 over that, but it's all right. So that's been fun. So the point being, I guess, I adjust the lineups every day. And this is our park. It's a nice little park in our community that hardly anybody uses, actually. You're definitely not going to be able to hear me now for a minute, because they started up some kind of generator. These guys are working late, too. It's like 5:30, 5:45, and they're still out here doing these roofs. All right, should be able to hear me now. But I like the way it works out, because you get some pretty organic lineups that way. Forces you to make some tough decisions sometimes. But I also like that the guys who truly played every game, or just about every game, basically guys who played 150 games or more, pretty much never need to rest. So that's the way I like to play it. So what are the other things I do? I play basic, because I don't like managing against myself, right? I like making the lineups, but I don't like having to figure out, oh, lefty, righty, which pitcher's in today, whatever. Now, normally in the past, I've actually used a couple of super advanced features or advanced features. First one is point of weakness. I think I've talked about this before. I've always used it in basic because I like it. I like the fact that pitchers have to come out, but there are so few starting pitchers, and I didn't get the extra players. That's a really big caveat for why I made the choices I made, right? I decided not to play with the extra players for 2026. First of all, because Strat doesn't card everybody anyway. Second of all, because I don't like the way they card players who are on multiple teams in the same league. And I don't like the way they handle player movement. So just sticking to the base set gives me a relatively few players with multiple cards. And those players who do have multiple cards played a significant amount of time for multiple teams, right? Those are the only players I'm moving, as the guys with multiple cards. I set up a little chart at the beginning of the season, and the only players who will be traded are the guys who had actual multiple cards in the mixed player set, right? So I think there's about 19 or 20 of them. There's 27 mixed players, but some of them are just extra players for a couple teams. So I think there's about 19 or 20 that will actually get traded, and almost all the trades in 2026 with those mixed players take place in mid to late July. So anyway, back to POW. So what I'm doing is I set the initial starting five based on the most games started for each team, as carded, that is. And then I use their point of weakness, but I made a couple of house rules for 2026 because of the pitcher shortages, basically. The starters pitch so few innings, and I'm not a big fan of guys going twice through the lineup and coming out, or guys going 100 pitches and coming out. There's no pitch count in Strat anyway, unless you want to get complicated and use some of the homemade systems out there, and I don't. So I'm using an old league rule where the pitchers are going to pretty much pitch their point of weakness plus 1 inning, right? So the number one starter on most teams has a point of weakness of 6, which means in my league, in my replay, he's going to go 7, unless there's 2 ways he won't go 7, okay? He gives up 5 or more runs, earned or not, I don't care, just runs. If he gives up 5 runs, he comes out at the end of that inning. Now, I mean 5 runs total. Doesn't matter when he gives them up. But he will always pitch at least 5. That's also an old league rule, because the bullpens are just too short. And there's no long men, really, and you don't have enough flexibility, and you don't have enough players to play the, to rotate 12 or 14 guys through the bullpen. So since every team has pretty much 6 or 7 men in the pen, I tried to do 7. I tried to do 12-man pitching stats across the board. So everybody's got 5 starters, 7 relievers, except for a handful of teams who only have 6 relievers because they really work the top 5 or 6 guys a lot of innings, right? So player gives up 5, starting pitcher A has a POW of 6. He gets to go 7. That's my plan for him. If he gives up 5 runs in the first, he's going to stay in through the 5th, no matter what, right? He's going to pitch 5 complete and then come out, even though his POW effectively for me was 7, right? He gives up 10 runs through 4. He's still sticking in to pitch through 5. And it works pretty well. It's basically a league rule that a lot of older Strat basic leagues have, or even advanced leagues, where that starting pitcher is going to pitch 5, because it prevents manipulation. It prevents weird lineup stuff when you're playing against other people. But for my purposes, it makes sure that The bullpens stay protected, and I can use a pretty simple usage rule for both starters and bullpen. Now, when might the pitcher stay in longer than 7? Right, again, going back, he's a POW 6, point of weakness 6. For me, I'm using point of weakness +1 as his goal, so he's going to pitch 7. Now he gets through 7 and he's got a shutout. He can stay in as long as he's got the shutout. So that protects guys who might have a no-hitter going. It's also going to lengthen things out to a usage factor I like better. It kind of more emulates how pitchers were used in the 80s and 90s. There won't be a lot of complete games, but compared to 2026 in real life, some of the better pitchers are going to get a few complete games. I think through the first week of the season, I had 3 or 4 complete games because these guys had shutouts going through 9 innings, right? But again, that was the number 1 starters going up against each other in a lot of games. So I don't expect to get 4 every week. I'd expect there to be 1, maybe 2 per week, at best. So 2 or 3 every 2 weeks. So we'll definitely see an increase in complete games the way I'm playing it. What else? How do I use my relievers? I pretty much try to pitch them for their point of weakness. So if a guy's, the vast majority of relievers in 2026 as carded are a POW of 1. So they're 1 inning guys. Guys who are 2 or 3 will pitch 2 or 3. So that kind of gives me pretty good situational usage. You know, if a guy gives up, the starter gave up 5 and comes out after 5, then often I'm looking for the one guy in each staff who has a POW of 2 or 3 and trying to get him in for the 6th and 7th or the 6th, 7th, and 8th. Usually if the starter's given up 5 through 5, the game's not close anymore. But sometimes it's closer. Sometimes both starters have not done well through 5. And you've got like a 7-6 game. Then I'm going to manage the bullpens a little more carefully. But still, you're trying to get some length there to protect the shorter guys. So my rule is this. If a guy pitches 1 inning, he can pitch again the next game, but after that, he's got to rest for at least 1. And guy pitches 2 or more, he's got to rest for at least 1 right away. Unless the bullpen's in dire straits, then I might bring him in an emergency, right? But that's how I'm protecting such short bullpens in a league where relief pitchers are going to get a lot of action. Right? So that's how I've been working it. See how I'm doing on time here. In 19 minutes and about 2/3 of the way done. About halfway done with my walk here. Which is pretty good. I don't exactly know how far this is. I know the whole loop is a little over a mile. That's where we usually walk the dogs in the morning. But I want to make sure I get my 10,000 steps today. I wanted to force myself to get moving this afternoon. So it's hard to take those first few steps, you know. So that's how 2026 has been going. Now through these 55 games, I've kept no stats. Obviously, I have score sheets manually done on loose leaf. I can kind of do whatever I want with that. But I haven't used a helper. And I felt really nicely connected. It's allowed me to bang out games very quickly. And keep a pretty good pace going of 4 to 5 games a day. Without a whole lot of stress. But now I'm at a point where I'm like, all right, that was a weekend. How do I want to keep stats? What stats do I want to keep? Am I going to start using the helper? Or am I going to keep them by hand? I'm very oddly inclined to keep them by hand, or to not keep them at all, or to keep very limited stats, because I just want to keep it easy going. And kind of not stress about it. So I thought about just keeping like wins, innings pitched, earned runs, saves, and strikeouts for pitchers. Real old school approach there. And I thought about just keeping like at-bats, hit, homers, RBIs, and stolen bases for the hitters. Chances are that's enough work that if I decide to do that, then I'll just keep everything. But I kind of don't want to slow down on just rolling games and having a good time. Plus stopping and recording all 53 games from week 1. You know, if it takes 5 minutes a game, you can do 12 games an hour. Which means that when I get to 60 games, that's 5 hours of stat keeping. It's basically an entire Sunday morning. I mean, that's a way to do it, I guess. Just do 60 games at a clip. But I'm not convinced of what I'm going to do yet. I kind of don't want to break that momentum. And in the end, I feel like if I do a full season, I'll really want the stats. Stats tell a big story. They add to the immersion factor as the season goes on. You start thinking about batting titles and home run champions and guys who might be approaching milestones or records. So at some point I'll probably bite the bullet, so to speak, and just sit down and start keeping tally somewhere. I have a notebook. I have a fresh, like, loose leaf sized notebook where I might just give each team 2 pages and, you know, 1 page for hitting, 1 page for pitching, and just keep what I can like that. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? How much do stats matter in your replays? I mean, obviously you're playing one-offs. I don't think they matter that much. They've always mattered an awful lot to me. But again, this is just one of those questions as your time becomes less and less and your gaming time becomes more and more valuable. You know, just how deep do you want to get into it? And would you be okay with keeping shorter stats? Like, I know when I first came back to the hobby, well, that's not true. When I first got into the hobby on YouTube, when I was recouping from that triple bypass 3 years ago, one of the guys I found was Jeff Guterman doing his 69 strat replay. And he was pretty much broadcasting 2 or 3 games a day. Which in and of itself is a huge time commitment, right? An hour plus a game. He's broadcasting for 4.5, 5 hours a day. And the only stats he were keeping besides standings were wins for pitchers and home runs for batters. And that was enough for him. Like that, he sustained that throughout the replay. But then when he went to do another replay, he was like, oh, I really want more stats. And I almost feel like that derailed him from continuing the next replay. And sort of became an anxiety point for him. So there we go with that mental health thing in this hobby again, right? But how important are stats to you? Do you keep them? How do you keep them? Now that you're doing, how you doing? Now that you're doing, now that a lot of people are using helpers, you kind of don't have to keep them. But I'm really enjoying just the physical act of scoring the games by hand again as compared to using Digital Diamond like I was from a payoff pitch replay. So, like, what's the trade-off? This is like the never-ending question, right? What are you, is what you're giving up worth what you're getting in return? Ultimately, I think for me, probably the trade-off of using a helper is worth what I get in return, which is really detailed stats that I don't have to put a lot of effort into. But yeah, that's about where we're at. So I think I'm at 10. Hold on. You see that? I don't think it shows up very well. I'm still short at 10, so I'm going to keep going. Make sure I get them in. Just kind of loop down here and loop back probably. But that is my, those are my walk thoughts for tonight. I'm going to kind of finish this up. And then, like I said, I'm going to post a little mental recap over at Rebuild Joe tonight. So I'm probably going to do that video next. But thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you're having a good Monday. Good start to the week. I was at work today, but in training all day, so it was kind of a drag. So it's actually good to be out and moving. I usually have a fair number of steps at work just from moving around and helping people and doing what I usually do. But I had very few today because I was on a Zoom training for 6.5 hours. So it was pretty important to actually get moving tonight. So good start. And we'll see how it goes. I like doing these. I'll try to do more dog walking videos and stuff like that. It's just a good way to spend my exercise time. Otherwise I'm listening to something, which is fine too, but I kind of like getting out here and just sharing my thoughts. So I think Dave might agree, it's very therapeutic. It's kind of fun to get out here, exercise, get your heart rate up a little bit, and think about the hobby and your projects, and just talk to people about them. So we will. I'll post this video, and then, like I said, follow me if you're interested over at Rebuild Joe, where the focus will be less tabletop and sports gaming and more sort of getting my old ass moving and getting in shape, and being idiotic enough to think I can do a Murph in 1 year from a standing stop. But, well, that's about all, folks. I'll talk to you later.